I bought a Framework laptop.
He's so brave.
Oh, you're expecting some big intro about how I'm sick of big brand laptop manufacturers and their terrible right to repair? Or how Apple is designed to keep you trapped in their ecosystem? Or possibly how laptops today are just so boring? Nah, I really don't care about any of that, to be honest. I bought a 16-inch Framework laptop because I think they're cool. But is it actually any good? Well, yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so if you clicked on this video, then you probably know what Framework is. They're a laptop manufacturer famously endorsed and co-owned by Linus Sebastian and known for their strong stance on right to repair. Their units are designed to be upgraded over time, and they make it extremely easy for the user to swap out any part of the laptop, from the keyboard, the screen, bezel, trackpad, spacers, and, well, pretty much anything. That is put on full display when you buy their DIY kit. You legit put your own laptop together when it ships. And when I say things are easy to assemble in here, I don't just mean that the ribbon cables are easy to access or like they don't use a ton of glue to keep the chassis together. No, I mean things magnetically snap into place and are connected by pins and pads. And oh my God. Freaking again. This video is sponsored by UGREEN and their new NAS device. The UNAS is much more than network attached storage, with the ability to organize and view photos, watch movies, share your files, and all of that with a blazing fast 10 gigabit link. Oh, and it's under $500. This is the DXP 4800 Plus, which comes with a 12th gen 5-core Intel processor and 8 gigabytes of RAM. In terms of build quality, you're getting a solid system. Aluminum housing, toolless hot swappable drive bays, magnetic fan filter, and honestly a super clean look. Transfers to and from my setup have been super fast on standard hard disks, but if you want to supercharge your speeds, you can add some NVMe drives for caching. Luckily, moving your data from one machine to the UNAS is easy with their all-in-one app, which allows two-way syncing between the devices. You can get some cool AI features like smart recognition and classification. If you're interested in one of the many UNAS models, then check out the link down in the description where you can secure up to 40% off with just a $5 deposit. So I ordered the Framework 16 DIY edition with both the GPU and regular expansion modules. I went with the Ryzen 7 7840HS with Radeon 780M graphics, but that GPU module comes with an RX 7700S. The screen is a 16-inch 165Hz 2560 by 1600 variable refresh rate matte display with 100% DCI-P3 coverage and 500 nits of brightness. Total price for this unit, which doesn't include any RAM or storage, was $2,400. But note that does include their 180 watt charger. Unboxing a Framework laptop is a much more interesting experience than a traditional laptop. We get a keyboard, number pad, some spacers, including the LED matrix, a bezel, Torx screwdriver tool, all of my expansion cards, the laptop itself with the GPU module installed, the other expansion module, and the 180 watt charger, which is apparently the only 180 watt USB-C charger that exists right now. Since I got the DIY edition, that meant I had to get my hands dirty. After checking my ego at the door, I opened up the guide and got to work. To get to the internals, you have to loosen 16 screws, and they have stoppers so they can't fall out, which is great. Removing the shield reveals all the goodies and treats, and you'll notice that they have QR codes for information on installation and replacement parts. I went ahead and installed a 2TB NVMe drive and 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. After that, simply put the shield back on. Now you can put the fun stuff on. The keyboard snaps right into place with magnets, then the spacers do the same on opposite sides. You don't have to use this configuration either. You can slide the keyboard over and use the number pad. Of course, I went with the LED modules though. Then the trackpad slides in from the bottom, along with the spacers on both sides as well. Then push the side tabs to lock everything in place. Next, I installed the bezel, which apparently happened just out of frame. Use your imagination. Last step was to install my I/O cards. I went with USB-C, USB-A, and a headphone jack on one side, then USB-C, HDMI, and DisplayPort on the other. I also snagged a 2.5 gig Ethernet card for when I want to do some editing from my NAS. And that's it. She's ready for business. Okay, we get it. It's easy to put together and repair. But who gives a shit if the keyboard is easily swappable if the actual laptop isn't worth using. I installed Windows 11 on here because I don't hate myself and then used it for a week as I would my normal daily driver. This included browsing the web and watching YouTube, replying to emails, doing some editing, gaming, and benchmarking to try to justify how much money I spent. Here is where laptop reviews are a bit different from a desktop system or a server. A laptop is a much more subjective experience since you're interacting so much with the built-in features like a keyboard, trackpad, screen, speakers, and chassis design. Sure, some of those things are objectively better between different laptops, but it's hard to put a number on the human experience factor of how it feels to use a laptop, you know? So which do you guys want to talk about first? The performance stuff or the subjective stuff? The performance? All right, first things first, Cinebench. In R23, we ended up with a multi-core score of 13,021 and a single core score of 1383. Both of these are solid scores, but not nearly as high as you'd expect out of a $2,500 laptop. You can find laptops with an Intel 13900HX for under $2,000 that would run circles around the framework. For gaming, we're gonna see a similar trend. The RX 7700S in the GPU module gives us solid performance. We were able to play AAA titles no problem at 1080p high settings. The benchmarks from Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Cyberpunk 2077 show this to be true. I even fired up The Witcher 3, cranked it to max settings, and it ran great, well over 60 FPS. Of course, I also had to try ray tracing. This made us take a pretty large FPS hit, now running around 35. In Cyberpunk, it was the same story, going from around 70 FPS to 30. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, I really don't give two shits about ray tracing. There, I said it. If you want a lot more numbers from a lot more games, check out this write-up from Technical City. Again, we have come to the conclusion that, yes, it's a solid performer, but for its weight class, it's going to fall behind. For $2,500, I expect to be able to play Cyberpunk at 1080p on high settings without having to use FSR. But here we are. With a regular expansion bay though, it's, well, surprisingly decent. I was able to play Cyberpunk at medium-low settings with FSR at 1080p at around 38 FPS. Not great, but surprisingly playable. Then of course you can play esport titles like League of Legends at like a zillion FPS. Hopefully with some driver updates in the future, we can see a bit more performance out of this setup. And something you guys probably don't care about but is important to me is how this thing handles editing. With the GPU dock, we actually had a pretty awesome editing experience. My timeline with a mix of 4K clips in various codecs like ProRes 422, H.264, and DNxHR proxies, along with massive web page PNG screenshots was very usable. Scrubbing through was smooth enough, there was little to no lag when playing in real time, and no dropped frames. Exporting this 9.5-minute video took exactly 7 minutes, which is great. Without the GPU module, it wasn't quite as good though. We could scrub decently enough, but there were some playback issues, especially on the clips that had any GPU accelerated graphics on them. Exporting without the GPU module more than doubled the time, taking 15 minutes and 36 seconds. To put this all into perspective, my main editing rig exported the same project in 2 minutes and 14 seconds. But that's running an Intel 13900K with a 4090, so it's not really in the same league. With that said, I would have no problem using this on the go. I'd have to change my workflow a bit if I didn't use the GPU module, but still usable. Another thing that makes this laptop nice to edit on is how accurate the screen is. Framework says this screen covers 100% of DCI-P3 color space, so I put that to the test. With my calibration tool, I got the screen looking real nice, and the test came back showing 100% coverage of sRGB and 99% of DCI-P3, which is still crazy good on a laptop. Like, seriously, go look up how much monitors cost that have 99% DCI-P3 coverage. All this to just say that the screen is super accurate. Now, I didn't do any official battery life tests because, like, I don't really do laptop reviews, and that means A, I don't have a standardized method, and B, I don't have a bunch of laptops sitting around with fresh new batteries to compare it to. So here's an article with some battery life info. Enjoy. All right, those are some performance numbers, and they seem like good numbers. For what you're paying, it's probably less than what you'd expect, so from a price to performance perspective, It's pretty mid. But the second, arguably more important aspect of using a laptop is actually using it. For this round of testing, I'll be comparing it to my two other laptops, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro and the Dell XPS 15 9520. First stop on this ride is build quality. First impressions were kind of mixed. The actual materials feel really nice, but the trade-off when making things so modular is that there are so many moving parts to the chassis, all locked into place with switches. Surprisingly though, this thing still feels solid. There's no rattling or creaking, the keyboard feels solid with a little bit of flexing, but not enough to notice when you're typing, and the overall feel is more cohesive than I anticipated. I'd put it between the MacBook and the Dell XPS here. I briefly mentioned the keyboard, which is fine. It feels like a laptop keyboard, but I'm no keyboard expert, so do with that what you will. The trackpad though, while not as large as I'd like, actually feels really smooth and is extremely responsive. Not quite MacBook level, but honestly really close. Okay, we saw the color accuracy of this screen before, but for normal use, how is it? And I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but it's great. Not quite MacBook level though. And that's because it's objectively a lower resolution and less bright screen, so that makes sense. But I do like the matte finish on the framework over the glossy on the MacBook. That may be a controversial opinion. I've stated that I think Apple makes the best laptops right now, and I don't think the framework is going to change that. But across the board, it seems like it's still better than the XPS so far. In terms of portability, I mean, that should be kind of obvious. The bigger it is, the less portable it is. With the GPU module installed, this thing is a chonker, but with the standard module, it's more similar to the 16-inch MacBook Pro. The Dell XPS 15 wins here since it's smaller and thinner, so neat, I guess. As for speakers, I really don't care too much about laptop speakers, if I'm being honest. As long as they don't sound like complete butt cheeks, then I'm fine. And these don't sound like butt cheeks. I mean, hearing my voice on here still makes me want to smash that mute button, but maybe less so than other laptops. And the speakers do fire up from the top of the keyboard, which does help with clarity as they're not doing something goofy like some of the other laptops that have down firing systems or ones that hit you from the back. So yeah, like, thumbs up here. Now let's talk about creature comforts, things that actually separate the framework from its competitors. The first being the customizable expansion cards. This is freaking awesome, man. No more complaining about the ports included on a laptop. Just pick exactly which ones you want. Then if you want to change them later, you can. I only bought a single USB-A, but I'm debating replacing one of my video out ports with another one. And it's cool that I have that option. Now the elephant in the room here is definitely the touchscreen, or lack thereof. Some people could never go back to using a laptop without one. Personally, I hate touchscreens on laptops since I hate fingerprints. You ever have that person that walks over to your screen and touches all over it when they want to show you something? Yeah, I've cut those people out of my entire life. Another thing is the palm rest while typing. Thank you for making these rounded edges. It's so much more comfortable than typing on my MacBook, which has super sharp edges that actually are a major downfall. And the webcam on the framework is actually pretty nice and very usable, even including hardware switches for muting the mic and disabling the webcam itself. Here's what it would look like if you were on a conference call with me while I was on my framework. So we've been noticing that you've been watching some strange things here in the office, and we're gonna have to ask you to stop doing that. Decent enough? The thermals on this machine are well under control, and even when the fans spin up, I wouldn't say that they sound terrible. The Dell is a bit worse, probably due to having smaller fans. Now I mentioned the objective battery life of the framework earlier, but I like to measure battery life from a real world standpoint. If I have it unplugged all day and go from working to close, then back to working multiple times, does it still have juice at the end of the day? I mean, yeah, it's fine there and probably about the same with the Dell, which both are nowhere close to the MacBook. I don't know what magic sauce Apple uses, but the battery life in real world usage on the MacBooks are actually insane. All right, well, that's what I think of the framework. Let's sum it up here. It's a great laptop with average specs, feels good to actually use as a daily driver, and includes some unique features like being highly repairable, upgradable, and customizable. To dumb it down even further, Build quality, good. Screen, excellent. Touchpad, good. Keyboard, good. Battery life, eh. Fan noise, average. Speakers, yeah. Customizability, excellent. It isn't cheap though, and you can certainly get a laptop with better specs for the same price, but again, it comes down to those subjective features. How much are you willing to pay for that customizability? Do you plan on using this system for a long time and just upgrading to new boards as they come out? Do you just think it's cool? If so, snag one of these. I can't imagine anyone would be upset with it. With that said, I still don't think it's going to replace my MacBook as my main daily driver. If we can get better battery life in Windows and nearly silent fans under load, then maybe I'll reconsider. But that's all. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my super unique, customizable I/O expansion card. You guys rock my socks. And if you're still watching, you're a 60 Hz display. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.